Okay, so today is the 23rd day of Elul. It's Elul. 20, it's actually yeah, and the 26th day of September, and we're in chapter 21. So where were we? So we talked yesterday about a new thing, the yichud of Yakov and Rachel. And we said that that's the Kabbalistic language for the unification between the emotions, particularly the complex array of emotions, like what we were talking about as the sources of the angels, the troops, and speech. It's called the yichud of Yakov and Rachel. Why Yakov and Rachel? Because the way the Kabbalah looks at the Torah, it sees everything as archetypes. So it looks at the story in Bereshis, in Genesis, about Yakov, and he has 4 wives. And he says, what is this? What's going on here? So Yakov is every man. Yakov is the human, but he has 2 names, as Yakov and Yisrael. So we're not talking about his aspect as Israel. We're talking about his aspect as Jacob. What's the difference between them? That Israel is the higher name, and therefore in Kabbalah it's understood to be related to comprehension. It's the masculine side of comprehension. We're not going to get into it now. And Jacob is his lower name, the name he was born with, the name that God didn't give him, the name that his parents gave him. And this represents his emotional realm. But Jacob is a very complex individual. You can see from everything that goes on in his life, he's a very, very nuanced and complex individual. So he represents, when you say Jacob, it's even more than saying, in some ways it's more than saying Zer and Pin, the small continents. Because here you have a full scale person who lived in the world, who actually lived. And he gives birth to 12 tribes and a daughter. The tribes, again, I think I mentioned this, I'm not sure, tribe and troop. I don't know if there's some relationship. But each one of the tribes gives birth to a whole nation. Each one of them is basically a nation. Each one of them has a king. Eventually, we get rid of tribalism, right? We get rid of tribalism in the sense that the Jewish people become a kingdom. That we phased out the whole thing of tribes. Nobody cares what tribe you're from. What do we care about? We sublimated it. It became that being part of a tribe is understanding what emotional realm you come from. Well, like an angel. Like what troop, what tribe do you come from? What particular conflagration of emotions do you come from? And then Rachel is his speech. Why does Rachel become speech? Because we say that that's the difference between Leah and Rachel. Leah, she is more comprehension. She is comprehension itself. That she is the intellect. She's silent. She doesn't speak. And Rachel is the one who speaks. She is the head of the household. Even though Leah is older, and even though Leah was married first, but in the end, Jacob loves Rachel. What does this mean? It means that there is a stronger connection between the emotional realm and speech than there is between the emotional realm and comprehension. So there's a lot to get into it. It's a whole imagery in the Torah. And then Kabbalah takes this out and it abstracts it. And so you have this yichud Yaakov Rachel, Yaakov yotze mizah, ela shu b'chinat yesod Abba shebezah. Now he says, Jacob, he comes out of the small continents from Zah, Zer and Pin, but he is what's called the foundation of father in Zah. There's 2 foundations of father in the Torah. One is Jacob, and one is Moses. They're both called the Yesod Abba. They're both called the foundation of father. What do I mean? That they are the extension of the power of nullification. Abba is like Chokhmah, is like wisdom. We talked about wisdom here being in Echad. We said Aleph is the Keter, is the crown, the source of everything that's beyond, ineffable. Then we said the Chet is Chokhmah. Then we said the Dalet is Dibur, that's speech. Yaakov, he comes out, even though he's associated with the small countenance. He comes out of the wisdom of the small countenance. And specifically, he's the extension that's called the foundation. In the same way that in the human body, the foundation is the procreative organ. It's extended outwards, and it affects outwards. It creates something in the world. It gives birth. So, Jacob is one, and the other one is Moses. Except that the difference is that Jacob comes out as a small countenance, and Moses comes out of wisdom itself, out of Father itself, the extension of Father itself, not just from the Zah. Venimshach leRachel, and he is extended into Rachel, hu b'chinat olam hadibur, and she is the world of speech. So again, this is the same construct that we had before. We have wisdom extending out, coming out of the emotional realm, extending out, and entering speech. And that's exactly the same process that we go through when we pray. V'zeu perush Yakov yibaka. We say that the letters of Yakov permute to spell the word yibaka. Jacob becomes to permeate, livkua. K'mo shekatuv, az yibaka kashachar orcha. Orech. Then your light will permeate like the dawn. Verse from Isaiah. ועל ידי בקיעה זו נמשך גם כן אחר כך מן המידות לדיבור. And this permeating the world of speech, the physical world of speech, causes the words to come out in their different combinations. שיהיה התחלקות צירופי האותיות ושיהיה התפעלות המידות מתלבשים בצירופים. But the most important thing is that it has to be emotional speech. It cannot be speech that is just to recite something. So sometimes we just speak. And we talked about that yesterday. So sometimes we just speak by, like we said, somebody who's in a store and he has everything, all his scripts written out already, what he says to people who come to buy and how to get rid of them fast, or he knows who's buying and who's not. That's speech that's empty. There's no emotion behind it. Then there's also speech, we said even higher speech, from a higher realm, like a king, who intuitively says things. He doesn't know exactly why he said it, but he said the right thing. A prophet is a little bit like that also. But what we're looking for in prayer is speech that begins in the emotional realm. Therefore, our archetype for this is Jacob entering Rachel. It has to start from Jacob. There has to be a picture of Jacob in a person's mind. Who's Jacob? Who is this? He's a very emotionally complex individual who lets his emotions come out in his speech. He's not empty. He's not saying empty words. So all this is a precursor to understanding what's going on when we pray. הערת חוכמה עילה בעמידות, אין כוח כלל בעמידות שהומשך מהם דיבור. Without, we said that Jacob comes out of the wisdom of the small countenance. Without wisdom coming in first, then there's no combinations that occur. In other words, the speech is also empty because you could be so emotional, so beside yourself that you would just speak gibberish. It wouldn't make any impact. On the one hand, we want emotion. On the other hand, we want there to be nullification. That's what the wisdom contributes. And that nullification allows the words to be chosen properly, for the words to come out in the proper way. ואז נקראות המידות אבנין סתימן. And there's a phrase in the Zohar that says that when the letters are, when the emotions are ready to be formed into words, they're called concealed stones. And the idea is, it's like when you build a house, so you don't just gather any stones. If you've ever built in stone, you know how this works. You have to collect a certain amount of good stones that you'll use in creating the building. So today, what everybody sees is you call up the factory and they send you like 3,000 blocks. Cinder blocks. They're made out of this, made out of that. Doesn't matter what they're made out of. So you order it. So we don't see the process. But if you go to build in the wilderness, and you need to make do with what you have, so you first collect stones. So there's a collection that appears before the words come out. There has to be a collection of things that have been gathered already. They're called avnin stiman, they're concealed stones, and they're also blind stones. Another way of saying this is that they're blind, meaning that because of the nullification, you can use them in any order that you want. You're a master of how to put them together. But you have to have this first. I would venture to guess that this is what an actor needs to do before speaking. There are actors who memorize all their lines. I always think that's crazy unless you're playing in a Shakespeare play. There's no reason to memorize every single word. It probably changed it all.
He had things posted.
Okay.
He wouldn't memorize it.
Right.
Because it was not natural.
Yeah, it doesn't mean anything.
It wasn't laziness.
Right. So you have to practice, but the practice builds your inner repertoire of what you're going to say later. And then when you need to call on it, you have it ready for you. But you have to first, and they're blind stones in this sense, that you know how to summon the right words when you have to express a certain emotion. And that's what a person needs to work on. So I'm guessing that this would be equivalent. שבוקע בהם נעשו אבנים נקיבין, כמו שכתוב בתוספתא דבשלח. When you add the nullification to these stones, they become feminine stones, or stones that are permeated already. They have a hole in them. We'll explain this. This is mentioned in the Zohar in Beshalach, and there it writes, עד לא השתקע אוויר הדקיה ולא נעיר נהירין, אבנין נקיבין הבו סתימן. דהיינו שמקודם גילוי בחינת אוויר הדקיה, שהוא הערת חוכמה עילה, אזי לא נמשך מן המידות בדיבור כלל, כמשל התינוק שאף על פי שיש לו מידות אינו יודע לדבר, מחמת שלא נשלמו בו גילוי המוחין. לכן נקראים אז המידות סתימן, שהם סתומים, ואין נמשך מהם גילוי למטה. ועל ידי הערת חוכמה עילה נעשה בהם בקיעה ונעשו אבנים נקיבין, וזהו פירוש יבקע צורים. ואז נמשך מזה הדיבור התחלקות הצירופים. So what is he saying? So this is the same thing as when you want to string a necklace together. So you have to take the stones that you prepared and you have to make a hole in them. If you don't make the hole in them, they're not prepared to be presented on the person's body as a piece of jewelry. Same thing is with words that you speak. They have to have a hole in them. The hole is an image. They don't really have a hole in them. But they have to be stringable. They have to be available. The letters and the words have to be available to be strung together in the right sequence. What makes them that? The nullification. So what he's saying here is that the nullification is needed to connect things together. In other words, you could have a huge repertoire of things that you memorize, that you know, and so on. But if there's no nullification, it still won't come out the right way. It still won't express what you're feeling. So let's think about this in terms of prayer. So we don't have time to pray, but let's say we did have time to pray. So we would look at the pasuk, at the verse that we're about to say in Psukkah de Zimra, and we know this pasuk. We've said it so many times. It's avnin stiman already. It's already concealed stones in us because we remember it already by heart. The question is whether we can use these words to express something, or whether we're just going to say them because we need to say them. So I repeat this many times, or Steinsaltz told me many times, in the middle of the week I don't pray. What do you mean I don't pray? I say everything that our sages told us to say. I recite everything it says to say in the Siddur. I say it. But I don't pray it. If I want to pray it, that I do on Shabbos. That I do on holidays, when I have time. And then when I look at a verse, there has to be thought, and there has to then be nullification, and only then can the verse come out as an expression of something, not just as beautiful words that I'm saying, and they're beautiful from Tehillim and so on. It's like memorizing Tehillim, it's memorizing Psalms. It's very important, but it's not expressing anything. Maybe sometimes it awakens some emotion in me. Sometimes, if I have time to pay attention, but that's not prayer. Prayer is the opposite. It's the emotion coming out through the words, not the words awakening the emotion. Right? When I speak to someone, how do my words make an impression? If I actually feel something, and then I express it. But if I don't feel anything, and I'm just speaking for the sake of speaking, so it's not going to make an impression. It doesn't mean anything.
So prayer is making an
So prayer is the opportunity to express my feelings. Now, somebody would say, if you want to express your feelings, why shouldn't you use your own words? Because he wants avnin stiman. He wants prepared words. He wants the prepared stones, but he wants to string them together to express his emotion. And to do that, you have to have nullification. So that we need to look at it a little bit more and understand this parable from the Zohar a little bit deeper. Okay? So we'll do that, God willing, we'll start tomorrow.
You can have this on